Diogenes proved it over 2,400 years ago, when he sat in the middle of the marketplace, brazenly relieving himself of desire, and remarked, "If only hunger could be satisfied so easily." That single act wasn't madness, it was philosophy in motion. He was showing that most of what we chase, love, status, wealth, are illusions we never question. And if you can stomach his brutal honesty, then in the next 17 minutes, you'll see why every man who has ever loved a woman has been sold a lie. By the end of this, you'll either walk away feeling broken or you'll walk away unshackled. Think about a man so unbound, so untamed, that he chose to live in a barrel, mocked kings to their faces, and told Alexander the Great himself to step out of his sunlight. Diogenes of Cynic wasn't just a philosopher, he was a hunter of delusions, a man who swung truth like a blade, slicing through the fragile myths that keep people obedient. And his sharpest target? The illusion of love. Most men never recover from their first heartbreak. They spend years, sometimes decades, chasing after the ghost of a feeling that was never real to begin with. But Diogenes? He never chased, he never begged, he never knelt before the altar of affection. And because of that, he may have been the freest man who ever lived. Let me tell you a story you've probably never heard. In Athens, there was once a courtesan, renowned for her beauty and allure, who became the obsession of the city's wealthiest men. Kings, generals, poets, each one tried to buy her affection, offering fortunes for a single night. One young philosopher, drunk on infatuation, ran to Diogenes with excitement. He boasted, "She looks at me with favor, she smiles when I speak." Diogenes, unmoved, kept eating his raw onions and replied, "Poor fool, that smile costs 300 drachmas." The young man stormed off, indignant. A week later he returned, shattered. His coin purse was empty, and she had already moved on to a richer admirer. Diogenes laughed. "The only difference between you and a beggar," he said, "is that the beggar knows he's being robbed." That was the first lesson. Women do not love the way men imagine love works. Modern culture tells men that love is a fair trade, that if you give loyalty, you'll receive loyalty. If you give devotion, you'll be rewarded with devotion. But history tells a harsher truth. Take the case of Heinrich von Kleist, the 19th century poet. He adored a woman named Henriette Vogel. He poured himself into her, worshipped her, lived only for her attention. In the end, when she was dying of cancer, she asked him to take her life. He did. And then he turned the gun on himself. Her final words? "Thank you." No tears, no regret, only gratitude for his service. That's all. This is the raw reality of hypergamy, the relentless drive to seek the best possible outcome, even at the expense of a man's devotion or his very life. Diogenes understood this thousands of years before anyone coined the term. When asked why he refused to marry, he smirked and said, "Marriage is the trap of fools. Why bind yourself to a creature that will always look for a stronger chain?" Every man remembers the first betrayal. For one, it was the girl in high school who swore she loved him, then laughed with her friends about his kiss. For another, it was the fiancé who promised forever, until a wealthier man appeared. The faces change, but the wound is always the same. Here's the truth no one wants to admit. Your heartbreak is not random, it is designed.
Look at Sparta. At the age of 7, boys were ripped from their mothers and thrown into the wilderness to survive. The weak perished. The strong returned as warriors. Why? Because the Spartans knew that suffering is the only teacher that truly matters. Heartbreak is no different. It's not a tragedy, it's initiation. It's your first and only honest lesson in female nature. Diogenes put it bluntly, a man who cries over a woman is like a dog howling at the moon. The moon doesn't hear, the moon doesn't care. But here's the pivot. What if that same pain could be turned into power? What if the very force that crushed you could be reforged into your greatest strength? That is where the weak turn back and the strong begin. Because every man reaches a moment when the veil is ripped away. It comes suddenly. Maybe it's the emptiness of your bed after she leaves. Maybe it's the smirk of the woman who knows she controls you. However it comes, the lesson is identical. Love is not a contract. Love is a game. And you've been playing blindfolded.
Diogenes understood this better than anyone. While Plato dreamed about ideal forms and Socrates debated the nature of virtue, Diogenes lived his philosophy in the streets. He slept where he wanted, ate what he found, and mocked anyone who still believed in fairness. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't cruel. He was simply awake. And that awareness made him dangerous. History remembers the men who transformed their pain into power. Think about Gaius Marius, the Roman general betrayed by his own people, exiled, left for dead. Most would have collapsed. He clawed his way back with nothing but rage as his fuel, and in doing so, reshaped the Roman Republic. Or look at Nietzsche. Rejected by the woman he adored, Lou Salome, he plunged into solitude. Out of that silence, he produced Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a work that redefined modern philosophy. These men didn't crumble under heartbreak. They forged it into something indestructible. Diogenes lived this principle long before them. When pirates captured him and sold him into slavery, he didn't cry, he didn't plead. He simply looked at his buyer and declared, "You need a master, I'll take the job." The buyer, stunned, gave him the role of tutor to his children. That's the first law of emotional alchemy. Your pain is currency. You can waste it, or you can invest it. Most men waste it. They drown in self-pity, replaying her laugh, her touch, her smile before she walked away. They torture themselves with useless questions. Why wasn't I enough? What does he have that I don't? Diogenes would have laughed at them. When a heartbroken man once asked him how to forget a woman, Diogenes handed him a rotten fish and said, "Carry this through the marketplace."
Confused, the man obeyed. By the time he returned, the stench was unbearable. "Now throw it away," Diogenes commanded. He did. "Do you miss it?" Diogenes asked. "Of course not," the man said. Diogenes smiled. "Then why do you miss her?" Women have known this truth for centuries. They are the original strategists of emotional warfare. While men built empires through steel and fire, women perfected the art of influence through illusion. Think of Catherine the Great. She seduced her way to the throne, deposing her husband and ruling Russia. Or Cleopatra, who bent Julius Caesar and Mark Antony to her will, not through beauty alone, but through calculated displays of vulnerability and power. These weren't accidents. They were the highest form of the game. And Diogenes? He saw through it all. When a famous courtesan bragged she could make any man fall in love with her, Diogenes challenged her, "Then make me." She flattered him, touched him, whispered promises. He yawned. Finally, she stripped naked before him. He didn't even look up from his bowl of lentils. "Your body is your weapon," he said, "but I am not your target." That's the second law. You cannot be manipulated if you refuse to play. Modern men drown in manipulation. They're told to open up, to bare their souls, to be vulnerable. And when they do, they're punished for it. Respect evaporates, desire fades, relationships crumble. Diogenes would have called it predictable.
When a man once wept that his wife no longer desired him after he confessed all his feelings, Diogenes handed him a cup of water. "Now spill it." The man did. "Can you put it back?" Diogenes asked. The man shook his head. "Then why did you spill it in the first place?" The final stage of transformation isn't about controlling women, it's about controlling yourself. The Stoics later called it apatheia, freedom from passion. The Buddhists call it detachment. Diogenes called it living like a dog. No attachments, no expectations, no fear of loss. When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man alive, stood before him and asked what he could do for him, Diogenes had one answer: move. You're blocking my sunlight. That is the essence of an unbreakable mind. Not wealth, not power, not the love of a woman, but the unshakable certainty that you need nothing. And yet, most men never get there. They spend their entire lives chasing validation, begging for scraps of affection, rearranging their existence around the fleeting approval of someone who could discard them at any moment. But what happens when a man truly wakes up, when he decides to stop playing blindfolded? That's the moment when philosophy turns into power. There comes a moment in every man's life when the world cracks open. It doesn't arrive gently, it doesn't whisper, it hits like a hammer. Everything you thought was true about love, loyalty, and need splits apart. And what pours out isn't enlightenment, but fire. That's when you realize the tears you shed, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices you made were never really about her. They were about you, your weakness, your hunger to be chosen, your desperate clawing for approval. Diogenes knew this truth better than anyone. He never begged for affection. He never bargained for love. He lived in a barrel, mocked the world's desires, and died with nothing, yet walked taller than kings. The greatest lie ever sold to men is that they need a woman's love to be whole. History is littered with men destroyed by that lie. Samson, strongest of all, undone by betrayal. Orpheus, who entered hell itself for Eurydice, only to lose her because he couldn't resist turning back. Hercules, poisoned by the hand of the woman he loved. These aren't love stories, they are warnings. Diogenes spat on such weakness. When a young man once sobbed because his beloved left him, Diogenes said nothing at first. Then he picked up a dead rat by the tail and dangled it before him. The man recoiled in disgust. "You shudder at a carcass," Diogenes said, "yet you allow a woman to rot your soul."
That is the first law of ruthless self-mastery. Nothing, not love, not sex, not companionship, is worth your dignity. Most men never learn it. They become addicts, chasing the high of a woman's approval, lying to themselves with the same story every time. This one is different. If I just prove myself enough, she'll stay. And every time, they're wrong. But you don't have to be that man. There's a story few philosophers share. One evening, Diogenes sat eating lentils for supper. A wealthy politician sneered, "If you would flatter the king, you wouldn't have to live on scraps." Without looking up, Diogenes replied, "If you would learn to live on scraps, you wouldn't have to flatter the king." That is the death of neediness. Most men are slaves to desire. They need to feel wanted. They need validation. And because of that need, they hand over all their power. Women sense this weakness instantly. It repels them, even as they exploit it. Diogenes understood the opposite truth. Power comes from not needing. When the most beautiful courtesan in Corinth offered herself to him for free, he refused. She demanded to know why. He shrugged. If you were giving away rotten figs, would I take them just because they're free? Furious, she demanded again, why insult me? Diogenes answered simply, because I don't need you. That is the second law. The moment you no longer need a woman is the moment she begins to need you. Not as a trick, not as a tactic, but as the natural consequence of independence. A man complete in himself cannot be controlled.
So what does it mean to be truly free? It doesn't mean hating women. It doesn't mean refusing love. It means understanding that love is not air. You will not die without it. Diogenes proved this every single day. He owned nothing. He answered to no one. He ate when hungry, slept where tired, and indulged when he chose. And when the most powerful man in the world stood before him, Diogenes had only one request: stop blocking my sunlight. That is freedom. Not the man who has everything, but the man who needs nothing. This is where most men stumble. They feel the fire in these words, but slowly slip back into old habits. They meet a woman who smiles just right, and suddenly they're back in the trap, trading dignity for scraps of attention. Don't be that man. Be the one who says, I'll enjoy love, but I will not need it. Be the one who walks away the moment respect is gone. Be the one who, when asked what he fears, can answer honestly, nothing. Diogenes died as he lived, free. When asked how he wished to be buried, he said, "Throw me to the wolves. I have no use for a tomb." Even in death, he refused chains. So now you stand at a crossroads. Will you keep begging for love, or will you burn neediness to the ground and rise as a man who cannot be broken? The choice is yours. And if you choose freedom, declare it. Type the word "barrel" in the comments below, not as a gimmick, but as a signal, a mark that you felt the fire and refused to let it consume you, a vow that you choose strength over begging, truth over lies, freedom over chains. So tell me now, who are you? The man who stays broken or the one who rises? Barrel.